going to show you a few different ways that you can do some machine quilting with your home sewing machine. And this doesn't have to be a quilt. You can do a lot of quilting techniques on bags and placemats and table runners and different things. Like, I know a lot of people that wouldn't call themselves quilters because they don't make traditional quilts, but you don't have to make a quilt to be a quilter and use all the quilting techniques that are out there. So I'm going to show you a few different things. I've prepared 2 different pieces of fabric, and yeah, it's Christmas fabric, but you know what? It was what I had, and I just threw it together to do some cute little patchwork, but the main part is showing you the quilting. So first you want to put together what's called your quilt sandwich. And so you've got your main piece of fabric here, and then you've got your batting and your backing material. Now, you want to lay down your backing. And now, if you're quilting on the home sewing machine, don't worry about cutting exact. Now, if you're quilting on a long arm, you know that you need, maybe you don't know, you need more backing and, batting than you have for your quilt top because it needs to stretch onto the machine. That's not as crucial with a home sewing machine, but I do like to leave a little bit of excess just to leave room. And so what I will do is I'll place my quilt sandwich together. I've got my backing, my batting, and then my quilt top. Now, sometimes, depending on the material that I'm working with, you can just leave it as is. But if you have a basting adhesive, that is also helpful to spray between the layers. It's a temporary adhesive, but it makes it so that your pieces don't shift and move around. So I prefer to use a basting adhesive. Some people prefer to use pins or basting stitches. You can use whatever method to baste your items together that works best for you. And if your quilt is bigger, you definitely, if you're making an actual quilt and it's a larger size, then you definitely want a baste to hold all those pieces together, especially if your material is slippery at all. I'm just using cotton materials today, so it's not as critical. Things won't shift and move around as much. And my batting is this on this project, it's a wool basted batting, so it's lofty and it's also kind of sticky. So my fabric just kind of wants to stick to it naturally. It doesn't really want to shift or go anywhere. And now I've got another piece over here where I'm using a different type of batting. This is a thinner, called a warm and natural. It's just a flatter, it's not lofty at all. And it's gonna give my project a little bit of a different look. And so I'm just gonna sew up a couple of different examples for you using my home sewing machine. So again, use a basting spray if you want to make sure that nothing shifts and move. And what I will usually do is I'll peel back my top and I will spray a little bit on there. I usually will protect my surface so you don't get overspray. But I spray from the middle out and then you push outward to prevent any wrinkles. And that way, if you do get a wrinkle in the middle, you're pushing it out and you're smoothing everything so it lays nice, even. I always give everything a really good press before I do any of my stitching as well. So that's a little bit on basting adhesive. Let's go over to the sewing machine and I'm going to show you some techniques that I like to use. So before we actually start quilting, I want to show you guys a couple of different things. Now, your sewing machine may have come with this little rod and you're like, what is that for? This is a guide. And this sewing machine did not come with a guide. Normally, when they do, there's a spot back here behind the foot that this guide just inserts into, and then it's adjustable. And so you can make your lines be however close or far apart you want them to be, but you leave this guide in the same spot. Then all of your lines, if you're doing straight line quilting, are the same distance apart. So because my machine doesn't have the ability to use this, I bought one of these on Amazon, and it's an adjustable guide that attaches onto my presser foot. And so what I do is I just unscrew, and then I'm going to screw that in place. And so now I can just adjust this wing nut here on the back side, and I can slide this along the bar to do the same thing. So I'm marking where I want my lines to be. So if I want them to be 1 inch apart, 2 inches, or whatever, this helps me keep consistent distance from all of my lines when I'm doing some straight line quilting. Now, your machine probably came with some sort of walking foot. This is the one that came with my machine. Now, a walking foot works with the feed dogs. So the feed dogs are right down here. And when you're sewing, the feed dogs move along and they're moving your fabric along the bottom. And then the rest is just going with it. Well, when you're quilting through thicker layers, it's helpful to use a walking foot because this also has feed dogs. And then the feed dogs work together on the top and the bottom. And sometimes it helps you get more even stitches. So I'm going to use the walking foot when we're doing the thicker material, but I'm just going to use this regular foot and my guide for this thinner one where I have just the warm and natural batting. So generally what I'll do to get started is I'll use my ruler and a marking pen to draw my first line that I want to use for quilting. There are several different ways you can do this. Now with straight line quilting, which is commonly what people use on their home sewing machines because it is easier to do. And there are so many tools out there to help you keep those lines nice and straight. So you could do any sort of design you wanted. I mean, you could do, I'm going to do a couple of different designs in the different squares to show you some options. So let's draw a line. I'm going to just draw a starting line and I'm just going to draw from the center, corner to corner. Okay, that's just my guide for my starting point. Now, if you didn't have a guide like this, you could then measure out and draw all your lines that you wanted to do. But we're going to just use this little tool. So then you'll stitch your first line. And often when I'm doing quilting on my machine, I like to extend my stitch length to about a 4. So I'm just sewing along that line to get started. And that is a fabric marking pen, so that line will disappear. Okay, so then what we're going to do is decide how far apart we want our lines. And we're going to move the guide to that area. And then what we're going to do is we're watching this area right here. We're not paying too much attention to where the machine is actually stitching because we want to follow this line to keep it nice and straight. So now we're just going to sew. And I'm watching this as I'm sewing. And then you simply continue to move it over. And so we would just keep doing this repeatedly all the way across. I'm going to turn it around and continue to line up our guide with that line. I am back stitching along these seams here simply because this is just one. I'm doing so many different lines. If I was stitching off edge to edge, I wouldn't be back stitching. And truly, this is just a sample project that I don't know what I'll end up doing when I'm all done. It's just for practice. Okay, so now we've sewn in a diagonal. Now, if we wanted to make like a patchwork little grid, then I would start again in the middle, go corner to corner with my pen, and I would do the same thing going the other way, and it creates a really cool pattern when you're done. Now, another way that you could do some straight line quilting on something patchwork like this is you could use the edge of your presser foot as your guideline. And so I'm just going to do a fun little stitch around this box. So you could just follow your stitching lines and make them be your guide. There's so many different ways to do your straight line quilting. And again, there are no rules. Do whatever you want to do. So this is giving me a cute little, box around all of my seams. So that's another way that you could do simple straight line quilting. Something else I want to show you with straight line quilting is it doesn't have to be straight line, but we're just using a simple straight stitch. I don't need this guide anymore, but I'm going to show you. You could do something like a fun little wavy stitch if you wanted to, just by guiding your machine as you go. So get started, and then you just simply let the feed dogs do the work, and then you could just guide it as you go and make a little wavy pattern. And they don't all have to be the same. You could do simple straight line quilting in so many different patterns like this. Like if we wanted to just go, let's just do corner to corner and make a giant X in this one. And again, if this is new to you and you're not comfortable doing straight lines like this, draw a line first. And I would just use my marking pencil or pen and my ruler. For me, I'm eyeballing corner to corner and I'm just watching. Is my line perfectly straight? Probably not. But when it's all done, you're not going to be able to see that. But it looks pretty good. And we could even, jazz this up and we could make like a snowflake pattern. Or star, whatever we want to call it, by going right through the middle. And again, I'm eyeballing this, which is really brave. If I were doing something that really mattered, I probably would not eyeball that. I probably would mark it out first to make sure my middle intersected. I got lucky. I'm going to be perfectly honest with you. That was pure luck that it worked out that way. So the possibilities with straight line is really endless. There are so many different things you could do. Now, we've all heard of free motion quilting, right? And I am no pro. I'm not an expert at all. And this may or may not work, but I'm going to show you a little bit of free motion quilting. This definitely takes practice. And your machine most likely came with a free motion foot. You're going to want to put that on. This is what mine looks like. So put that in place. Then the other thing you need to do is you need to drop those feed dogs because you don't want them moving your fabric around. You're going to be in control of your fabric. So you drop your feed dogs so they're no longer going to move your fabric. You are. You control the speed of the machine with your presser foot. And so you can get going and then you're guiding it with your hand. So this is what I mean by you're going to have to practice, because this takes a little bit of skill. Not all my loops are the same, but sometimes I find as you speed up, it gets a little bit easier, where you might feel like it's harder to control the faster you go, but so really you can kind of do whatever you want with free motion. You can do some, zigzags, some loops. You could draw hearts. I mean, there are so many people that are so talented with their free motion work and create all their own patterns and things. I'm not that person. If I'm going to do any free motion, it is just very simple, very basic stitches. But it's fun to play with. It's fun to practice. and just be creative. That's a little bit of free motion. That is going to be super dense, but I just wanted to give you the feel. Now, if you're going to do free motion, definitely don't start on your project. Make a scrap quilt sandwich like this and just practice, practice, practice. So next, we're going to do something with our walking foot. I'm going to stick to straight line quilting with the walking foot. And if you're having any trouble with the thickness of your material, this is really going to make a difference. Now here, we're going to draw a line from corner to corner. I use the center as my guide because that has all four seams sewn in where your outsides do not yet, but they will when you're done. So make sure you follow that center, and it's going to come off the edge and look like it's not straight, but once you sew everything together, it will be. We're going to do some quilting that's just a little bit going to give a more cuddlier, softer look. And to do that, our lines are going to be further apart. Now, this walking foot also does not have a place to put a guide. So I can't use a guide with my walking foot. So I'm going to have to trust myself or draw a bunch of lines with my marking pen. That would be the safer bet. But me, I'm going to just go for it here for the sake of this video. And I'm just going to go corner to corner. So I feel confident doing that with just my eyes. But if I were doing something a little bit more particular, then I would definitely draw my lines first so I had a guide to follow. Now, when you get to the point right here where you're, and especially if you are doing a quilt or something larger, and it gets, you've only got so much throat space, I just like to either fold or roll my project to help it go through the machine more smoothly. So we're going to turn this around and we're going to do the other side. And I'm just going to fold this over so that it's not getting caught up or stuck in my machine. You want things to go through as smooth as possible. You can see how this walking foot is just kind of easily pulling the fabric through. I really like using a walking foot. It makes quilting with the machine so simple because it's effortless. You can see all I have to do is really guide with my hands. Now we're going to go corner to corner here. We're just going for it. I'm just really watching this point. That's what I want to hit. And then when I get to that corner, I'm really watching this point. But you can already see, because of the combination of the loftier batting and the sewing is further apart, that this project is much more fluffy, cuddly, cozy, and soft, which that's how I like my quilts. All right, so now you can see how fluffy and quilty and squishy this is. I love this wool batting, but you should use whatever batting you prefer for your project. But the walking foot really does make a huge difference in the ease of this process. So here we have the one we did with the walking foot with the loftier batting. You can physically see the squishiness in there, and it's just, oh my gosh, it's so cuddly. Here's what it looks like on the back side. really nice, even, neat stitches. And then this is the one where we were just doing some practice rounds on. This had the thinner, less lofty batting and more dense, closer together stitches. And it's not as cuddly. It's still super soft because of the fabric that we used, but this is what it looks like on the front. And we didn't do all the squares. We were just having some fun and experimenting on the back side. But either method works. I encourage you to just grab some scraps of fabric and just start playing with your machine before you really attempt quilting a quilt, if that's what you're looking to do. But if you want to make quilty projects, this is a great way to practice. Get your ruler, get yourself a good marking pen, and draw those lines. Make some guides. If you want to do some free motion doodle work, it's a great idea to draw out what you want to sew on your right on your fabric. Just use a marking pen that will disappear on you, but you could doodle your design first and then follow along with your sewing machine. And honestly, to get the rhythm of that free motion, it really helps to draw the design over and over again. So you might want to practice that. So I hope that helped you guys with your confidence on doing straight line quilting right on your home machine, because it's very possible to do. It just takes a little bit of practice. But be sure to hit that subscribe button, and you're following along. Make sure to get the notification bell turned on so that you don't miss any of the tutorials that we have coming up.